Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your co-hosts, Alan Sanders.
And I'm the other one of your co-hosts, Walt Murray.
And it's our pleasure today to welcome our first guest back here on a Monday. We've got Matt Gray. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Hold for applause, please. I'm a fan favorite, I already know.
All right, Matt, first thing, since you're already kind of taking charge of the microphone there, which is good to know that you're very comfortable.
Oh, I'm comfortable.
Walt said when we were doing some show prep, you had never seen the movie before until about a week or so ago.
I have not seen a lot of Gene Wilder films, actually, and I think I've seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and to Walt's recommendation, I saw Blazing Saddles, which was amazing, obviously, and now this is my third Gene Wilder film, Young Frankenstein.
Excellent. And just for a point of order, it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
Willy
Factory.
Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Because the real name of the book was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which the remake was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I've already screwed up everybody. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I saw it in school.
That's my favorite all-time Gene Wilder character is Willy Wonka. I think Blazing Saddles is my favorite movie, but Willy Wonka is my favorite role.
Makes sense. He's a jolly guy.
So Matt living up to all of our expectations.
I failed in the first 10 seconds.
Anyway, okay, so welcome back to our podcast here, where we are now diving into minute number 6. And Walt, to remind our audience, I had a pretty big issue, first of all, with a coffin being just left in front of a fireplace. I had some problems with that last week.
Yeah, if we ever happen to get to speak to Mel Brooks, that is going to be my first question for him on your behalf, because that really bothered you that a piece of their furniture is a coffin. And we've even talked about this off air this week.
So when we last left, someone was busy playing corpse tug-o-war with a box that had been kept in what we're assuming is Baron von Frankenstein. We're going to assume this is some of the older or elder Frankenstein. We don't know his actual name because the title is Baron.
Right.
Because later on, Inspector Kemp will even call Gene Wilder Baron Frankenstein. So,
that's right.
But we know that something is being struggled with to get out of the coffin.
Yeah, struggling with something that looks like a cigar box with the family seal on it. And we'll later learn, and I'm going to kill his name. This is probably where we need Malty on the show. Herr Falkstein. I've got more of the Georgia redneck pronunciation of it.
That by Herr Falkstein. Herr Falkstein. It's like a race driver. Yeah. Number 72, Ricky Bobby, coming up on Herr Falkstein.
And he'd be the guy with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
Sponsored by Snickers.
So Herr Falkstein, and we figure that out later, obviously, with the credits, because we do go straight to a shot where he successfully gets the box away from the corpse. Mm-hmm. We have your typical, and they do this a lot, you've either got your cartoon almost like it fades to black via the circle where it goes, comes right back open, and we see that he is actually attending a medical lecture with a bunch of med students.
Well, and something that stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you about this because you're much more on the production side of movies than any of us are. So much of this movie has to do with tone, and coloring is an important part. When you look at him walk into the medical lecture, he's the only one in dark clothes. Everybody else is in white lab coats. The lighting is much brighter than most of the other scenes of this movie. Do you think that had any significance?
I think it's intentionally meant for us to not only draw our attention to the one person who stands out. Not only is he the oldest person in the room, stands out, he's the only one wearing a hat, the only one dressed in all black. He's got a chair left for him, an opening in the very middle but very back of the room. So almost setting apart from all these other younger medical students who are in the middle of hearing a lecture about the brain. The whole time we're watching this, it takes us almost 2/3 of the way through this minute before we even see the back of Gene Wilder, even though he's been talking the whole time.
Yeah, so it's an interesting lead-in to this minute, and it does kind of has a slight change in tone, I guess, momentarily in this minute.
Now, this bothered me a little bit. I'm trying to figure out why, because this guy obviously travels a long distance. He'll be telling us that in the coming minutes. What's with the chin quiver? It draws my attention to it every time, because as it's panning up, all of a sudden you see it quivers twice. It's like first time he does that, and then he does it just one more time before he decides, okay, I think I'm in the right classroom. I'm going to go take a seat now.
Yeah, and he kind of dawdles in. Even though he's wearing a very nice suit, very bohemian suit. It is bohemian? That's what they said in the book. So
is that what they call? Okay,
I'm trying to. They went for a bohemian feel. Is what they said.
I said corrected.
Well. It may have been by accident.
All right, Matt, this scene coming up, because you weren't with us all last week. We were watching the credits, because basically that's all that happens. Were you taken off guard when the coffin bursts open?
It did spook me a little bit. I won't lie to you. I kind of went, oh.
Yeah.
I am a man, by the way. In case anyone's wondering, I am a man.
So
it just spooked me.
But a little unexpected to have it just get wrenched open like it does, and you're staring at basically a man who's been deceased for some time.
Quite some time, and him wrestling with it was also unexpected.
So did you find yourself, because Walt and I talked a little bit about the humor, because nothing up until he tries to pull the box out indicates there's anything funny about this movie. So did you find yourself going, skull, wait, now he's snapping back and wrestling with the skeleton?
I mean, I guess I came in knowing it was going to be humorous. I was just waiting for the first bit. But I mean, that's kind of the thing about, like, I was born in the 90s, so I didn't grow up with Gene Wilder as movies go. Obviously, you guys got to grow up with him as an icon. So I was kind of worried coming in if I would even find it funny at all. And because, comedy sometimes has trouble transferring between generations.
It may not age well.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm glad to say that I found this movie objectively funny.
And that's something we chatted about, Walt.
Yeah,
it's about would a younger generation, which is why we had Matt on here. We've got a millennial. Yeah, actually, you're technically pre-millennial.
Hashtag YOLO, bro.
YOLO, only live once.
Millennial, in case you couldn't. Only 90s kids remember
I've
this.
got young kids too. I'm hip with the lingo.
I doubt it.
I try to be
saying words hip with the lingo sounds like you're
you
hip.
sound like you're on par. Yeah.
I'm on par. I'm on point.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, on point.
Well, on fleek.
I'm not to that stage. I'm not to that stage
Really?
yet.
Okay.
I don't even try.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Walt and I said last week, which I think rolls right into the start of our storyline here, because they specifically are doing sort of an homage to the old Frankenstein story and a style of storytelling that almost makes it feel timeless. They're not making fun of, let's say, a movie that came out 5 years ago,
right?
Where the humor could sometimes fade very quickly when you don't. After 5-10 years, you're like, it's not as funny anymore. Good to hear that you at least enjoyed some of the comedy elements of the film.
I mean, it surprised me, I suppose, but yeah, I think I can safely say that Gene Wilder, with all the films that I've seen him in, he's a funny actor.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of funny because throughout the film, I noticed he has a way of acting with his eyes. He can convey emotions with his eyes, and I think it's kind of surprised me that he is a funny actor, but also just seems that he's also just a good actor, bare none. Like, I think you mentioned that in episode 0, that he's just a good actor, not even just a funny comedic actor.
And I fully believe that his background in theater is what helps transcend into film. I've always found that any of the actors in even our current generation that we really like, if you look back, if they've got a basis in theater, especially if it's Shakespeare or some of the classics, they tend to just be a better actor on screen.
Well, and particularly for a movie like this, that they're trying in every way to capture that 1931 Frankenstein feel, including the way that they shot it, the way it was produced. So to have a classical actor like that who is able to do comedy adds that element to this movie that you probably couldn't have with many other actors then or now.
Now, we don't have anything really funny per se in this actual scene besides the finishing of the corpse tug-o-war. I mean, that kind of transcends from minute 5 into 6, and then we're right in the classroom. Do you get lost at all in any of the medical jargon? Matt, let me ask you that first. Did you find yourself kind of droning and not even paying attention to a lot of the structure of the brain, especially the pons and the brain stem and how it goes down into forming the spinal cord?
It definitely wasn't my focus. I mean, it's just sort of one of those things that I guess it's more background noise than what I'm focusing on. I'm more looking at the scene and what's happening, but I understood what the medulla oblongata was, and that was about all.
You've heard that term before.
I've heard that term once or twice.
Well, it's funny because I was probably not I can tell you I was not the greatest student in high school or college.
That doesn't surprise me.
I know it's a shock.
Whoa, hold on, wait. Let me find the buzzer here for the news flash. We've had a breaking news alert.
Yeah, I know that's shocking to everyone. But I actually passed a biology test in college and one in high school because of this scene.
No, you did not.
Because of the voluntary and involuntary reflexes. When we got to that section, I was like, oh, I can explain this. I've seen Young Frankenstein about 40 times. I can explain this.
I can explain involuntary
My
reactions.
teacher looked at me like a monkey doing a math problem. Walt understands this? This is crazy. But no, because of this scene and how many times I'd seen it, I was able to nail it in class.
Well, one thing that I will say about the Gene Wilder here, and what I love about him, is the dialogue is perfect. I mean, he's talking about the biology of the internal workings of the brain, about what would happen if you were to pull the lobes apart and see some of the underlying structure that leads to the brainstem. And he sounds academic. He sounds
he does
very, and I like how they're establishing this early before he loses his mind later.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, that I think that they really wanted to establish him as someone who was trying to set himself apart from his grandfather, from the Frankenstein name, as a standalone professional, separate from all the past history with the family.
All right, as we get through the classroom, and again, we're looking at a bunch of young medical students. They're taking a class. They're all in lab coats, so I'm assuming they're all heading into the medical profession. Was it interesting to see how many students he's lecturing in front of? I mean, it was a fairly large room for him to be a lecturer, so he's obviously teaching a pretty large class.
Yeah, it is. And there were a couple things that kind of stood out to me with the class. The class size seems very surprising, so I wonder if it's like a first-year med student washout kind of class. But the second thing was the hairstyles and the way the students look. And I didn't really realize this until I was listening to Mel Brooks' book on tape, is that this was actually set in 1974. I always thought that it was set earlier, but you can tell from the hippie hairstyles of some of the students and some of the hairstyle of, and then also having women in the class, that it is more of a 1970s class. So there's a lot here.
Well, remember, there's another thing we sort of touched on last week is we forget that this is technically set in the 70s.
In the 70s.
Because
I didn't even know that.
as soon as they shift, well, first of all, being in black and white, we automatically, in our minds, assume older. You
That's
just
right.
assume older, because even you and I, Walt, we've been around a little bit longer than Matt. We still
say a
grew
lot
up
longer.
where
No offense.
all of our movies were color. The only things we saw in black and white might have been reruns of Twilight Zone, or maybe the first couple of seasons of Gilligan's Island before it went into color.
Right.
Everything that we grew up with, even in the movies in the theater, was color. So I always associated black and white with the movies my mom and dad grew up with.
The company that did the developing of the film for this movie had not done a black and white movie for 6 or 7 years before this. So everything had transitioned. I think the only other movie I can think of maybe around the same time was Raging Bull. That was shot in
with
black
De Niro.
and white. Yeah, De Niro. I can't think of any other films from around that time or even now that are shot in black and white.
So I think this is what's amazing, is this is one of the few scenes that lets us realize we are the movie set in a contemporary setting, obviously 1974 for when it came out. But we forget it because as soon as we go to Transylvania,
Yes.
there's nothing to indicate that we are
That's what confused
modern.
me, I suppose. That's why I never thought this was set in 1974. I was like, oh, what is this, 1920s or 30s back in some old town?
Yeah,
an old castle.
that's what I thought.
The villagers.
I think that was definitely on purpose.
Well, I do like the dichotomy it gives us, setting us up very early on in the film with Gene Wilder being in an academic setting, very bright, very sterile. Everyone's, like you said, wearing lab coats. You watch how many times in the coming minutes he rinses his fingers, very germ-focused, very contemporary. We don't get a sense that this is biology, turn of the century. This is modern medicine that he's giving a lecture about. And this is one of the few times that we are in the modern, quote, era, because when he makes the shift, not just in time to going back to his grandfather's castle, we literally go back in terms of the feel of everything. The small village, the town, the train station, everything suddenly becomes old world.
Yeah, everything. And it's funny, even here in this minute, he washes his hands in the bowl, but he hasn't done
I don't
any
think he washes
lab
it yet
work.
in this minute. It's coming up.
Okay, it's coming up.
But he'll do it like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, and he does it just to wash chalk off his hands. Like he's only worked on the board, and so it's kind of a funny setup for him as a character. That even though he's trying to break away from that, he has the Frankenstein family mania already kind of cooking here.
He's got a little OCD, maybe?
A little bit,
Just a hair?
a little bit.
All right. I mean, this pretty much kind of wraps up for me, anyway, the minute in and of itself, because at the very end, and it's a great way to kind of, tease for tomorrow, but we get our very first interaction with the student. We don't really get to hear the whole question. We know one of his students is going to ask him something. So, Matt, before we wrap up this minute, anything you want to add? You weren't here last week, so you can kind of give us your thoughts about the opening, the intro. You already you told us that the jump scare got you, and then you realized the tug-o-war was a bit funny.
I mean, yeah, it definitely set up, like you said, a serious tone, science, no indication that it's going to be a humorous film besides the scene before, but I mean, it's all obviously just one big setup to his mental demise, I guess you could call it, so... Yeah, I mean, just a great setup, I guess.
Well, Matt, real quick, when I gave you my copy of Young Frankenstein, Tell us the story of what happened when you took it to watch it with your family.
Oh, I did watch it with my father present, and after we had watched the movie, I think he said the last time he saw it was when he was in maybe high school or his early 20s, and he hadn't seen it since then. But we went to watch it, and after we got done, he said, "Can we keep this for another day? Because I really want to watch the behind the scenes and special features, and maybe watch it one more time." And I was like, "Oh, I can tell Walt. I'll keep it another day."
Well, and it's interesting to see that it really does bridge a lot of a big, huge age range in a couple of
That's
generations.
what surprised me. Yeah. That I found this funny.
I gotta ask
Growing
you,
up in comedy movies like
were you
Talladega Nights.
laughing for your benefit, or were you also a little bit laughing watching your dad laughing?
My dad's laughter did sometimes get me to laugh. He's a bit of a wheezer, so it's easy to laugh when he laughs. But exactly. But
Smedley from the
Exactly.
Smedley.
I think they actually based Smedley on your dad, right?
it's exactly what he sounds like, to be honest.
That's too funny. Exit stage left. Even. I love that dog.
Smedley the smoker.
Would they have the Laugh Olympics? Remember?
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah,
broke
yeah.
up into 3, and you had the really rottens. Smedley was always laughing at the plans of all of the rottens. And, they only won once. Did you ever used
Yeah.
to watch the show?
Oh,
there was
watched
only
it
one
every
where they
week.
kept cheating, and everything kept backfiring because they were trying to lose. Like the one episode they were trying to lose, and they ended up winning the Laugh
right.
Olympics. Don't ask me how we got. Oh, thanks to the wheezing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, my father's a wheezer. There you go.
So that gets us to the left. Well, that's great.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for minute number 6, but I do want to say a special thank you to Adam and Brad of Gutterballs from gutterballs.tv. They were the ones who first analyzed a movie 1 minute at a time. And, of course, Pete and Alex of the Star Wars Minute. You can find out a little bit more about if you're a Star Wars fan and you want to find this same format, you like it, go to starwarsminute.com. Those are the guys that we're sort of, all these movies by minutes are following that format.
And we also want to say thank you so much to the folks who've gone out to iTunes and other places and rated us and told us what they think. We really do appreciate it. If you do like what you're hearing, please go out to iTunes, and the iTunes app is the place to go. Give us a 5-star rating, make a comment. That'll make it easier for people to find us who are looking for this type of podcast.
Our website's easy to find, thewilderride.com. It's got links to our social media. Find us on Facebook and Twitter, and especially with Facebook, if you like it and you want to share these stories and episodes and some of the behind the scenes that we put on social media. Don't forget, you can invite your friends and family to also like our page so they'll be informed of when new episodes drop. Matt Gray, thanks for sitting in. You want to hang out, come back tomorrow for another episode?
I suppose I could if my schedule's not busy. Oh, yeah, I have nothing going on.
Okay. So we'll get you back in here again tomorrow, folks. We'll have another episode drop on Tuesday where we dive more into who is this med student standing up and has a question for the professor when we come back next time to The Wilder Ride.
Where we look at Dr. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein?
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Frau Blue.